statistics in baseball, more than any other sport. And now
Yeah.
you're telling them, well, these stats that you believed in that were this all the time no longer exist.
Yeah, I mean, you need a time machine to go back and verify that everything was on the up and up. The stadiums, as you mentioned, how do I know Josh Gibson, if all accounts, was a great player? How do I know that he wasn't hitting over home runs over fences that were 200 feet away from home plate? I don't know.
Right.
And the record keeping, as you mentioned earlier, was spotty at best. And, it's unfortunate that we can't just recognize, the contributions. The Negro Leagues were important at the time because those guys had nowhere to go. I wouldn't call it a minor league necessarily because there was nowhere else to go. Right. But to add those statistics into Major League Baseball statistics, to me is counterproductive.
And I agree with you. Let's welcome Our Lady of Sports and Sonia. She's a double minority, right? So they say, she's a woman of color and she's a woman. I think the men are the minority today, but that's a whole different subject. We're going to talk about that. Sonia, we're talking about the Major League Baseball without any warning, not letting, I mean, everybody was surprised, and all of a sudden, all the statistics from the Negro Leagues come in and they are right. And a lot of people are questioning this now, saying, what do you mean they're right? How do you know they're right? And we talked about, they didn't keep stats like they've kept stats in the other leagues. We don't know what parks they played in. We really don't know the overall competition. We knew some were great. Josh Gibson was great. There were some others that were great in the Negro Leagues, but we have no way to verify that. And the Hall of Fame wants us to say, yeah, that's true. That's right. That's what it is. What are your thoughts?
So it's so funny that that this topic is coming up today, because I was just speaking about this yesterday about different things, including like name changes. I was on with Ken Dobie, and he's a veteran, and we were talking about a lot of military bases being renamed and whatnot for all of the inclusiveness. And for me, I was like, sometimes I get slack from people that I know because they feel like I'm not being, quote, on their side. I feel like what you all said, there's no way to really verify. I guess this kind of goes under the at least where I'm from, if your great grandma had a Bible and there was no birth certificate, if your name was in the Bible, the courts back in the day would accept that as an actual record of your birth, because it was recorded, under an oath presumptually, by it being in the Bible. And I feel like we're kind of in that same mindset with these, with these stats. Of course, we know some of the greats just by what we've seen, but they actually have a Negro League Statistical Review Committee right now that is actually getting this information as far back as the Jackie Robinson 1947 Dodger debut, and trying to implement all of this in now. I really feel like, I don't know what it's stemming from. I do believe everybody deserves their recognition, but it's kind of, in my opinion, akin to before there was a Super Bowl. You go to Soldier Field and you see all these championships that they have around their stadium. I've seen them in person. And you're like, wait a minute, I didn't know, that. But unless you know the history of the team, you don't know that they have all these championships before there was a Super Bowl. At least if you're under 40, you don't know that. And I think it's kind of the same thing now with, them trying to include everybody. This is not going to be an overnight project with them doing this. And let's be honest, who's going to be here to verify those facts? Most of those people have long since passed away. And so if you don't have some type of, for lack of a better comparison, scroll or something etched somewhere, you're basically going word of mouth. And when you start going word of mouth, that's when you get the facts become diluted and they're not factual anymore. They're more opinion. Like, I could go out and say, 100 years from now, the world may still be here and I won't be. And none of us will be. And I might say, oh, in my opinion, X, Y, Z. And I write that down in my opinion. In 100 years, does that become fact because that's my opinion? That's where we run into trouble. That's my opinion.
You brought up Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson was, at one time, the first Major League Baseball player. That just changes that too. I mean,
Yes.
because these players are now considered Major League Baseball players, Jackie Robinson now is not the first Major League Baseball player. He's the first to play in the MLB, if you want to call it the White League or whatever. He's the first to do that, but he is not now the first Major League Baseball player. You can't, and I don't want to hear he is now because you just changed that too.
And let's not forget during the war when the women started their own league. Thus the movie A League of Their Own that came out because women were trying to find something to do while their husbands were deployed. Are we implementing that now as well? I feel like at some point it removes the integrity of what we know as a sport. I think everyone has their own way of being recognized, but I feel like once we bring in all these other factors, it's not going to be the same integrity that we have for the league today.
Says it in our commercial. The people that run baseball, they try very hard to ruin it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Listen, the women's is recognized in Cooperstown. There's an exhibit for the women's baseball there, and it's nice. It's a beautiful exhibit if you've ever been there. If you haven't been, by the way, get to Cooperstown. It's a beautiful little town. It's only about an hour and 20 minutes from me.
You'll never catch me dead up there because they can't do things right.
Well, the National Baseball Hall of Fame has nothing to do with Major League Baseball, just to be clear. Nothing.
I understand. That's why they're screwing it up all over the place.
And by the way, they do screw it up as well. But they should have an exhibit just for the Negro Leagues. There are 30-some Negro League players in the Baseball Hall of Fame already that have been inducted, like Buck O'Neil and many other great players. That's how they should be recognized. They shouldn't take stats that can't be verified. And by the way, it goes back to 1920, where they're going to count these stats from. They shouldn't add those to Major League Baseball record totals because, again, it's not relevant. We don't take the ABA and add it to the NBA stats or the WHA to the NHL stats or anything like that.
Maybe that's next, Keith. Who knows? Maybe they'll follow suit.
It might be.
Yeah, you'll hear Dr. Paul's take on that Saturday as we talk about sports memories. So tune in for that. That's going to be interesting because he's normally very reserved. I wonder if he'll be reserved about this. How you doing, Stephen? Glad to have you in today.
I just want to plug in real quick before we move on. And let's be clear, we are at least me, and I'm sure all of us want to make sure people get their due recognition. It's not about removing them because of ethnicity or beliefs or anything, or even being outdated, so to speak, since it was so long ago. It's about being able to verify the facts on whether or not this actually is what it is. Because like you said, Jackie Robinson was, according to what we all knew, the first minority player in the league, the first Black in the league. And now we are led to question that. And so it's not about removing like, okay, we don't want everybody included as one, unless anyone that's watching gets the wrong idea. It's about being able to verify what is in here, because you're talking about big boy news. You're talking about the best of the best. You don't want to just pop Warner baseball this thing. You want to make sure this is the way it's supposed to be.
This just in, Jane Smith from the Women's League has now surpassed Bob Gibson at 467. She has a 500 batting average. She is now the lifetime leader in the ERAs in Major League Baseball. Just to let you all know out there, that's a breaking news here. I made that up.
I had like 550 in a Tri-Valley League in 1977. I just want.
Well, you better get on board with that, Keith, because they haven't recognized you yet. So anyway, we did cover Hernandez and him getting paid to leave. A whole interesting thing there. Of course, me and Pags both think it's ridiculous. You pay somebody to leave when they do a bad job. It looked like on purpose a lot of times. Maybe that was his intentions. And this may be a new way of umpires after 20 years because they're tenured. Maybe this is a way for them to get out now. Maybe they can just say, well, throw out a couple stars, call some strikes that are definitely not strikes, and I can get a package too to leave baseball. Very interesting. And Keith and Sonia, it's not just their coaches are paid to go. Players are paid to go when they don't perform. I mean, it's nothing new. It's just this is not a player or a coach; it's an umpire. That's the difference here. So anyway,
And whenever
he had
Hernandez out, I'm okay with, pay him whatever he wants, get rid of him, because he's given a burst of bet. I don't understand why the rest of the umpires have stood up for this guy the way that they have. Dale Scott, who's a great Major League Baseball umpire, has written several books. I interviewed on my show, and he dropped out of a couple of baseball groups that I belong to because of the bashing of Angel Hernandez. And I felt bad because he felt he had to defend his profession. Most Major League umpires do a very good job. This guy doesn't. And if you don't do your job, you shouldn't keep your job. That's it. Umpires have a very strong union. It's probably stronger than any of the player unions. And that's why he's stuck around as long as he has.
I mean, he's had 30 years, 3 decades. I don't know, in my opinion, it's kind of like ageism is real. Let's be clear. In the workplace as well as in every profession, ageism is real. He has to have had a plethora of years and experience. And it's kind of like, the league is trying to, renovate, for lack of a better word, to bring in more fresh faces. And to keep it fresh and relevant, you've got 30 years. It's not like they let him go after 5 or 7 years. He's had a solid career. He unsuccessfully tried to sue the league. And so now this is their way of saying, okay, you're not happy, because if you weren't happy, you wouldn't have brought a lawsuit against him. So now this is a happy median that they both can, part ways.
But that was 7 years ago, Sonia. That didn't happen this year. And I don't believe it's ageism as much as it is. He's terrible.
He's not even
terrible. What he did 20 years ago has no relevance on what he did last year. I mean, maybe he was a good umpire at one time, but what he did last year or this year has been terrible.
Maybe that's why you're saying, since the lawsuit didn't go through, maybe he's just like, I'm not going to care anymore. Like Jay Cutler with the Chicago Bears, how he just didn't care. You could tell he didn't care. And it was like, you know what? If you're gonna deliberately tank this sport, then you can go ahead and go. Here's your parting prize.
Yeah, and I know all of us, we do a bad job. We get a nice little severance package, don't we? Anyway, let's get to the NBA playoffs.
Is there severance on this show? Because I could screw up really bad if I have.
Yeah, well, you've already done that, and we haven't forced you out yet, Keith. So we'll let it. You're stuck. Sorry, buddy.
Contract.
I don't believe that in that stuff. I keep you coming on, and it's entertaining if anything else. So let's talk a little NBA here. The T-Wolves, they don't get swept. They stay alive with 1 win. They go back home. I think they go back home to the next game, play in Dallas, and then back home again. So they got 2 home games to try to win this series. I don't think it'll happen. I think the Mavericks will close it out. Maybe next game, maybe the game after. Kyrie Irving didn't have a good game as he's had in the series so far. I think that hurt them a little bit. But listen, finally, Towns came through, played a good game, and that's really what helped them to win. I don't know if he can keep having games like that, especially when he's playing, against one of the better players in the league. One thing I want to say, great adjustment by the T-Wolves was putting a small guard on Kyrie, not having Edwards on him. He ran Edwards into the ground. I think Edwards was tired at the end of the game. That's why he didn't have a good game. He was worried about his defense. Putting that, I don't have his name in front of me, but putting that smaller guard on Kyrie to run around the court with him, I think helped him out and kept Kyrie from scoring. What are your thoughts, Sonia?
I'm glad you asked me first. So you probably don't remember, but when we met last Wednesday, I predicted this. I have the clip. I literally just watched it. And I even talked about it Friday with the guys, and everybody was like, it's a bold prediction. I felt like that they would win it in 4 or 5 were my exact words. So at this point, I feel like it's delaying the inevitable. They're gonna be done regardless. I also had Boston to pull it out, so I'm a happy camper right now. I do believe that switching up the guard position was definitely beneficial to them, at least to make it look like they gave themselves an effort and didn't get swept. But broom, mop, it's still going to be over next game. I mean, just get the mop bucket. They don't want to use a broom, we'll get a mop. They're going to get out of there.
Pags, is there any way they're a young team? I'm talking about the T-Wolves right now. Couple older vets, big inside, with a very active Garden Edwards. Is there any way they can pull this out and win it in 7? Be the first time ever?
No, I didn't think so. I'm surprised that they were able to even win the last game. So I think that NBA doesn't want them to win it either. Or they want now Dallas to just close it out because they want to get on to the finals. They want to be able to have games. The fact that Boston swept, they were able to move everything up a week. Because they couldn't keep the same schedule because there'd be no basketball for a week. So they're gonna try to move it up as best as possible. I mean, and really, Indiana should have been up 3-1 in that series. They should have been up 3-1. They blew it 3 out of the 4 games.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about the Celtics, Keith. Unless you got any thoughts on the T-Wolves that are different from Sonia and
I
Pags.
don't have anything that's different than what's said already. I think the series will end tomorrow night.
I think so too. Celtics, on the other hand, got to be the favorites. I don't care who comes out of the West. Jaylen Brown played a terrific series, ends up with the Larry Bird MVP trophy. And of course, it seems like you got Tatum and Brown, but there's always a player that steps up, whether it's Hofford, whether it's White, whether it's one of the other players. Someone always steps up and becomes the third scorer, and that normally helps the Boston Celtics win the game. Only thing that's kind of bothering me right now, Keith, I understand they played a young team. Celtics defense doesn't look as good as it did during the season.
It's been a lack of defense a lot in the playoffs, it seems, even in that Knicks series and whatnot. Teams that have played pretty good defense didn't necessarily play good defense, but I just think this Boston team has been through these wars a couple of times now and faltered, and I think the matchups are good for them. Dallas, as well as they've played through these playoffs, I don't think will stay with Boston. Porzingis getting back, I think, is a big deal for the Celtics as well. I think they're very deep and they are experienced at this level of play now. And sometimes we talked about it a few times. Sometimes it takes that losing experience to be able to get over the top and win. And I think this is the Celtics year. Everything's breaking right for them.
So Pags, if the Celtics, let's say they win, I mean, do they have to win again next year, or at least the year after? I mean, they got one of the best duos in the NBA with Tatum and Brown. They got a good team. It seems like they can pick up pieces. I mean, can we compare these guys if they win again, say next year, the year after? Can we compare them to the 80s Celtics when they were winning the titles?
Absolutely not. And they're going to win the first one yet. So, I mean, one thing that I've known about the Celtics is that they seem to come up small. This team has only come up small in the biggest of moments. So until they win it, they still got to win that first one before we can start talking about, well, they got to win it. Once they win a second one, is it like the team of the 80s? No, I don't think that team in the 80s. I mean, and I remember that clear as day. You know what I mean? Because, I mean, the Sixers were also a team of the 80s or the late 70s into the 80s.
Yeah.
So, and you had the Lakers. There was a 3-team league, and then fourth team was Milwaukee, but it was like a stretch for them.
They could never get past the Celtics or to Philadelphia, really. Playoffs.
Right. So, because the league was so much different back then. Like you had Atlanta that was perennial, like a fourth seed because they had Dominique Wilkins and stuff like that. It's like, Bill Walton, who just passed away, and I wasn't a big fan of his in the first place, but R.I.P. I mean, it was they wound up beating the Sixers in the finals. The Sixers went again in 1980 and lost. It was so Sixers were all there, but that Boston team was amazing. You know what I mean? Danny Ainge, McHale, Parrish, Bird. I mean, it's like who was the guy with all the freckles on his face?
Dennis Johnson. It was it made that team go. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, you think
Yes.
about and that's a Philadelphia guy naming 5 Celtics.
Well, I gave one
I know
to
that's
you.
how big they were.
Well, I knew he had freckles.
Mr. Freckles. So, all right. So you mentioned Bill Walton died at 71 of cancer. You know, you may not have liked him. Foot injuries kind of messed his career up in the beginning there. He did take Portland Trailblazers to and win their only championship. He was with the Celtics in '86, playing, you know, off the bench, giving Parrish some time, doing quality minutes. Thing I liked about at the time I didn't. You know, at the time I really didn't like Bill Walton as an announcer. But he kind of grows on you. He was kind of wacky and zany, doing anything, and it had nothing to do with basketball. I saw a clip of them having a candle on a cake, and he says, "Well, what do you do?" He says, "Well, just eat it." And he shoved the candle lit and everything in his mouth with the cupcake and ate it. So he was just a kind of a crazy guy, and by all accounts, from what I've seen, a very nice guy to be around. Picked everybody up around him. He did have times where he did protest against the war. I mean, you know, he did have
I actually heard something completely different. I heard completely
Really?
different stuff about him. That he was not a nice guy. That he was actually, you know,
I didn't hear that.
yeah, I heard that he was not a nice guy to get along with, and that he was like an ass a lot.
I
of the
didn't
time.
hear that,
Oh.
and I actually cried, and I never, you know, I actually was extremely sad about this because I remember Bill Walton as a kid, as my dad watching him, and I just was like, you know, he just seemed so full of life, like Mac was saying, like very lovable. I haven't heard anything negative. I mean, I guess if you look for something negative on anybody, you can find it, but I prefer not to. But I got you, Pags.
There were people who didn't like Bill Walton for whatever reason. So his anti-war protests in the 70s, and he was the #1 draft pick, and he wasn't playing as well. He got hurt. By the way, if you want to read a great book about basketball in those times, read Breaks of the Game by David Halverson. It's a great, great book. It's about those 77 Blazers and what happened to them afterwards, after Walton breaks his foot. And the team talked him into taking shots, and he kept breaking his foot, and he had to sue the team. So a lot of stuff went on. So a lot of people didn't like him. But one thing that I would say is that and people aren't always like this, he was true to who he was all the time. Always true to who he was. So if you didn't like him, you didn't like him. But if you did, you did. And you got to respect a guy who's true to what he really is. There's nothing fake, I don't think you ever saw about Bill Walton, ever.
He said he went to 1,000 Grateful Dead concerts. I read that.
Yeah.
And they were teasing around saying he was one of their drummers. I loved it.
And by the way, this guy overcame a lot of stuff. He had a stutter that he couldn't even complete a sentence when he was until he went at UCLA. When he got there, he still had it.
Yeah.
And listen, here's a guy who was an anti-war protester and a child of the 60s and the early 70s, and he still credits John Wooden, who couldn't be any different from Bill Walton than anybody walking the planet, as being one of the most influential people in his life still today. But
well, I'll give you one more story about him before we move on to the NFL. When he went, there was no formal meeting with Bill Walton and Red Auerbach when they came together. He just asked Bill Walton, "Can you play?" And he said, "Yes." He says, "Good, you're on the team." I mean, that's the way they did. Red Auerbach did business back then, anyway. So, I agree. You know, whether you liked him or not, he grew on me. Rest in peace, Bill Walton. So let's get into NFL. And you know, it's easy to 2020 hindsight, right? But I want to go over with you my list of the worst trades made in the last 10 years in the NFL. I want to see if you guys agree with me. And, you know, Sonia's already shaking her head. You're not number one, Sonia. To me, the worst one right now is, of course, Russell Wilson being traded to Denver Broncos, who he doesn't play for anymore, which is pretty ironic. So Russell Wilson gets traded for the Seattle Seahawks. I have 2 first-rounders, 2 second-rounders, a 5th-round pick, and he goes over to Denver. And his first year was terrible. Second year, at the end of the year, he played okay. You know, and this would be, to me, the best to this. I'm going to do a make-believe story right now. All right. Russell Wilson goes to Pittsburgh, holds off Justin Fields for 1 year at least, brings the Pittsburgh Steelers to the championship, because all he has to be really is a good quarterback for Pittsburgh to go to the championship. How would that make Sean Payton look on paper? So first, is that the worst trade? And if that scenario happened, would there be some kind of questioning Sean Payton's judgment? I saw Pags yawning. What do you think, Pags?
First off, you're right. That is fairy tale land there. I don't think there's any chance that he does what you just said he does. He's not going to bring Pittsburgh to the Super Bowl. Whether they, he's barely going to make Pittsburgh go to the playoffs if he gets to play at all. So that being said, would I love to make Sean Payton look like an ass? Absolutely, I would love that part. That's the one part of that story I liked. But I think that it's impossible. And unfortunately, I mean, I said it when he got traded, that you were saying that he's a Hall of Famer. I'm like, I don't think he's a Hall of Famer just yet. And I said that I think that his best days are behind him. And so far, I'm right.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. Keith, what are your thoughts on that?
It's definitely a bad trade, but I'll agree with Pags, I don't think the other end of that is going to play out. And I've got two trades for you where it did play out and help the teams. Herschel Walker getting traded to the Vikings, which really helped build that dynasty of the Cowboys in the early 90s with all those draft picks that they traded. And Brett Favre going from the Falcons to the Packers.
Oh, yeah.
And they had no quarterback. And he had some pretty good years. Whatever you think of Brett Favre, he had some pretty good years in Green Bay. So I would put those two trades ahead of that one.
No, I'm saying the worst trades, not the best.
Bad trade.
The worst,
yeah. Bad trade for the Falcons.
Yeah.
You can turn it any way you want. Bad trade for the Vikings.
So, Sonia, let me give you my second one. Houston trades Deshaun Watson with all his off-field problems. Texans trade him to Houston. All right. So
the Texans traded him
to Cleveland.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, because Houston and Texans are the same team. Anyway, Cleveland ends up with Deshaun Watson, as I said, all the off-field issues. Again, a boatload of trades for this guy. Houston is now the favorite to win their division. Cleveland, we still really haven't seen what Deshaun Watson is yet. I mean, he had a little brief stay there, gets hurt. He's not on the field. So I would think that maybe this would be the second worst trade in the history of football in the last 10 years.
I would agree. I mean, I don't even know of a comparison to rate the negativity that he's brought on and off the field. They literally guaranteed that no matter what, they were going to keep him. I was just so puzzled by that, as if he hadn't even finished all of the litigation and resolving all the stuff going on. And they literally stood by him they were BFFs. They just sold their soul literally for this guy. And they really didn't know him. They were just basically going off of old stats. We always know that different players play differently with different teams. And I think that it's going to just continue to tank. And not only that, they brought Joe Flacco in for the sake of trying to save the season. I don't know if they've still dangling him or not, but there's some rumor out there that he may come back at least for another year, and the locker room is going to be divided over it. I've been told some people are really waiting on Deshaun to come back. They're his buddies, but there's a part of the locker room that are they don't want no part of all that off-field stuff that has crept into the locker room. And then they got rid of all this stuff, and then the entire division is over 500. So this is not like it really propelled them to win the entire division and win out, and we still don't know how he's going to be when he comes back from this injury. So it's a tsunami of bad stuff going on right now.
I agree. I'll give Keith my third on my list anyway, worst trade, and it's got to be the Carolina Panthers. I mean, they gave up DJ Moore, who ends up being an unbelievable player for the Bears last year. The first round pick ends up being, Caleb Williams, who might be better than Bryce Young in the long run. We'll find out.
Wait a minute.
He's benched right now.
You've been bashing Caleb Williams for months. You can't say that.
Well, I've been bashing Young too. I've been bashing Bryce Young too. So I'm fairly bashing both of them. But anyway, we'll see what happens with that. They use their second-round pick to get Sweat from the 49ers. And now they still got another, a first round and a second round next year coming. And to me, it's all on Bryce Young now. What does he do in the next couple of years? If he becomes that franchise quarterback, maybe it kind of equals out. If he doesn't, it's gonna look terrible for years to come.
I'm all ears.
You can't call that one of the worst trades though until something does happen to make it the worst trade. Right. Now, it's just a trade,
That's true.
Right.
That's true. But I can say, not getting CJ Stroud, giving up that DJ Moore, Caleb Williams, I could say that's pretty bad, Keith.
Christian McCaffrey, they had to give him up too. It's a whole lot of stuff that went behind the scenes.
Wasn't there? But just to throw another trade out there that occurred, didn't Ditka, when he was coach of the Saints, give up his entire draft to Tampa Bay, who did wind up going to the Super Bowl and win?
Dang, that's got to be number one.
That's what happened, right? I remember that occurred.
Ricky Williams, in the wedding dress and getting married.
Through the cracks.
Good. And speaking of my last one that hasn't totally come to fruition yet, you have to talk about Aaron Rodgers, right? The Packers trade him away. They end up going to the playoffs. The Jets end up, 7-10. Rodgers didn't play. Depending on what happens next year, or this year and next year if he sticks around, if the Jets don't make it to playoffs, that's going to go down as one of the worst trades.
But what did the Jets give up there?
Yeah, I was going to ask.
They ain't give up nothing.
Yeah, that was like a 5th-round pick, was it not?
Trade if you didn't trade anything.
I think
he's going into his 20th year, so.
I think there was more than that. I think there was exchange of picks. I think it was a first for a second and a fourth for a fifth or something like that. I know trades were given up for that thing. Of course, the money that they saved getting rid of them too allowed them to, go out and get the salary cap under control too. So that's another thing you got to look at. I'm not sure, Pags, but I know there was some exchange of draft picks for Aaron Rodgers.
It was a first. It was a first and a fifth.
There you go. So again, and the salary cap has to be taken into, I think, the consideration too. Hockey, Pags, Panthers and the Rangers are just going at it overtime. Unbelievable game again, and the Stars, they did it too. I mean, they're up 2-1 now, I think it is, and they had a hat trick and 3 goals in 3 minutes. Pretty exciting hockey out there right now.
It's. I'm surprised that the Rangers are even 2-2. I mean, I said that they needed to score 3 goals a game to win. They won one of those games, only scoring 2 goals, and they got lucky in that one. So I'm going to say, as of right now, the way that series is going, I'd have to give the edge to Florida because as long as Bobrovsky stays hot, that's going to happen. I think Dallas has got the way to win these games now by you have to have somebody on Connor McDavid and Draisaitl. You have to have actual guys defending them all the time. And if you stick on them and you play their body some, they're not going to score any points. And I think that's what Dallas has got going on right now. And how about Dallas? I mean, not for nothing. I don't like Dallas. Obviously, the Cowboys are that being said, but talk about winning begets winning. You got the Texas Rangers. They won the World Series. You got Dallas both on the brink of going to the championship again. And it just so happens that it was after they sold the team. After that guy sold the team for the Mavericks. Yeah.
It is. It happens once in a while where you see three teams end up in playoffs or in the championship, but it's very rare. But it does happen. Yes, sir. Yes, Keith.
His comment on Pags' comments about the Rangers. He's right. I mean, their defensive goaltending has kept them in this series. You can't keep getting outshot 3-1 basically, game after game after game, and expect to win these series against a good team as Panthers. And it showed up twice. They could have easily been swept out of these playoffs so far with the way that's played out. So they played well, and everything except getting shots on goal, and they have got to get the offense going here.
And that's what I said in that 5-4 game. I said Bobrovsky's having a bad night.
Yeah.
I said I expect the Rangers to score this goal in overtime, and they did. But they got 3 goals is the goal. They got to score 3. If they don't score 3, they're not going to win. And like I said, they got 1. They squeaked 1 2-1. But I don't think that that's going to hold true for the rest of the remainder of this series. It's the best of 3, and 3 goals is what's going to win these games.
That
Yeah,
5
Grabowski's definitely a leader on that one.
Yeah, that 5-goal game. I think they only had 20 shots on goal. I mean, it's
Right.
unbelievable how.
Yeah.
And again, you got to give the Panthers some credit there too, I guess. So.
And the Panthers
Yeah,
are taking just not just the shots on goal. The Panthers are taking 100 shots on net,
Yeah,
and
oh,
only 35 are getting on goal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the other 65 where they're blocking them and stuff like that, or they're missing the net. They are really throwing everything they can at the Rangers, and the Rangers are playing with the puck.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Great points. Great points. Real quick before we sign off, because it's close to the top of the hour, Caitlin Clark finally drops 30, so I can stop writing her for a while until she goes back to playing bad again. 9 athletes are female athletes are having a Barbie dolls made in their likeness. I think they're already out. So if you want your whoever wants a Barbie doll with Venus as a toy, there you go. You can have Venus Williams as a toy Barbie.
And I tell you, it's a shame we didn't get
that's
to the
about
view,
it, folks. I want to. Next time,
It's a shame we didn't get
next
to
time,
the
Pat.
view.
There's always next week when you're not in. Maybe we'll talk about that.
Maybe I'll
Folks, thanks for joining us tonight. Up next, a lot more sports for you. Stay with us, and we'll see you real soon.